This is CBS.
Start your engines, Delaware Valley. The Philadelphia International Auto Show is back January 7th through the 15th at a new location, the Pennsylvania Convention Center. See hundreds of new 95 model vehicles from over 40 manufacturers. See concept vehicles, exotic cars from Bugatti, Ferrari, and Lamborghini. Plus Rusty Wallace's NASCAR and the Flipmobile. Meet Sarah from Models Inc. and Caroline from Baywatch. Plus a rare appearance on opening day by NASCAR's Rusty Wallace. It's the Philadelphia International Auto Show, January 7th through the 15th at the new Pennsylvania Convention Center. Don't let it pass you by.
The all-new Mazda Protégé has more room than any car in its class. But what class is it? After all, it has more room inside than a Honda Civic, more room than a Nissan Altima, even more than a 5 Series BMW. So what class would you guess the new Protégé is in? Well, here's a hint. The all-new Mazda Protégé. But there's a surprise in every package.
The cougar is sighted, but still on the loose in Delaware County, the latest at 11. Privacy and the media. Newt Gingrich raised the issue just yesterday when he objected to our airing of his mother's remarks about what she said were his views on the First Lady. Once you enter public office, do you relinquish all rights to privacy? President Clinton certainly understands the dilemma. Lawyers for Paula Jones say a new federal court ruling clears the way for Mr. Clinton to be questioned about what he did or did not do with Paula Jones while governor of Arkansas, even though the trial itself won't begin until after he leaves office. The president's attorneys have appealed the court ruling. In today's world, is anything private? That's the issue tonight as we launch Bernard Goldberg's America, a forum for his unique reports. Bernie?
Connie? It may be hard to believe, but once there was something called privacy in this country. Private meant none of your business. And even public people had privacy. Presidents had privacy. But that was a long time ago, back when the press and the presidency were in bed with each other. And just about everyone agreed that some things really were none of your business.
We face the future with confidence and with courage. We are Americans.
Once upon a time, the President of the United States was bigger than life. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, elected president 4 times, a man who said things that wound up in history books.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
But FDR and his wife Eleanor also had private lives, which in those days, believe it or not, were actually private. Historian and author Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Well, what is so amazing to me to realize is that in the White House, not only are Franklin and Eleanor living in the family quarters, but right above Franklin Roosevelt's bedroom is his secretary, Missy LeHand, who's really his other wife.
And then there was Princess Martha of Norway, who during World War II moved into the White House.
She was beautiful, and she had long legs, and she wore high heels, and they would teasingly call her his girlfriend.
And Franklin wasn't the only one with a close female friend living in the White House. Eleanor had one also, a former reporter named Lorena Hickok.
The two wrote letters back and forth that are filled with intimacy, filled with, "I can't wait to hug and kiss you." Lorena's living there in the White House. She later goes on to live with other women. Can you imagine what somebody would have made of that?
And if you're saying, gee, I didn't know any of that, don't feel bad. The American people who elected President Roosevelt didn't know any of that either, thanks to a press corps that didn't report any of that. Was he having an affair with her?
He had an affair with her for years.
Walter Trohan covered the Roosevelt White House for the Chicago Tribune. He's 91, and he's talking about FDR's relationship with Missy LeHand, his secretary. Did you write about it?
No.
Did you not report some of these private matters out of respect for his privacy?
It was his privacy, but it was the press code. Not individually, but the press.
And the code said what, basically?
Well, we don't go into the private life. We don't divulge that.
Privacy for a president? It's history.
Mr. Clinton exposed himself to me that day.
Yes, I was Bill Clinton's lover for 12 years.
Governor Clinton use a condom? Do you think you put questions about infidelity behind you?
The White House may not have changed much since President Roosevelt lived here, but our notion about privacy and the presidency sure has. The very idea that reporters would have asked FDR about his sex life is unthinkable, about as preposterous as someone asking the President of the United States of America about his underwear.
Mr. President, the world's dying to know, is it boxers or briefs?
Usually briefs.
I thought, on the one hand, here's the President of the United States on MTV being asked about his underwear, what has this society come to? And then my second thought was, my God, he answered it.
Howard Kurtz is the media critic for the Washington Post, who says the press is more uninhibited these days because society is more uninhibited these days. Howard, can you imagine anybody asking Franklin Roosevelt about his underwear?
It boggles the mind to even contemplate. In the 40s and 50s and 60s, television shows, sitcoms, didn't show married couples sleeping in the same bed. I mean, there were lots of things that simply weren't discussed in public. Now, it seems everything is discussed in public. And so the media, which still think of themselves as a serious-minded institution, have become like all of entertainment. We pander to all this kind of titillating stuff that people are interested in.
Are you prepared tonight to say that you've never had an extramarital affair?
Now, questions like that wind up in the most legitimate places. This is 60 Minutes. And it's because the mainstream media that used to scorn tabloids and their sex scandals are now taking their lead from those very same tabloids.
There is an extensive series of reports in today's New York Post alleging that a former U.S. ambassador, a man now deceased, had told several persons that he arranged for a sexual tryst involving you and one of your female staffers in Geneva in 1984.
I'm not going to take any sleazy questions like that from CNN. I am very disappointed that you would ask such a question of me, and I will not respond to it. I haven't.
Now character has become this all-purpose fig leaf. We can report any story, no matter how sleazy, no matter how personal, and say, well, this tells us something about the person's character.
Do you believe that adultery is immoral?
Yes.
Have you ever committed adultery?
I do not have to answer that question.
I think we're going too far today, but I don't think maybe we went far enough then.
Let's say you called your editor back in Chicago.
Oh, I told my editors about Missy, yes.
You did?
Oh, yeah.
And let's say you said to them, I want to write a story about President Roosevelt and Missy.
Oh, no way. They wouldn't let me.
No way.
No way.
It was just assumed that nobody would ask him questions that intruded on his private life.
Doris Kearns Goodwin tells us just how different things used to be in her latest biography, No Ordinary Time. The press, she says, not only revealed nothing about FDR's relationships, incredibly, it revealed virtually nothing about, well, just listen to this. The President of the United States, FDR, is paralyzed. Paralyzed. He can't walk without help.
He can't even get out of his bed in the morning without calling for his valet to help him into his wheelchair to get to the bathroom. And no one had any conception of that, except the people who worked with him closely.
I'm a tough guy.
And the public knew that he'd had polio, but simply assumed that he was lame. They thought he could walk. They thought he could get around.
This is astounding, that the president is paralyzed and the press doesn't report it.
I find it impossible to imagine. If a new reporter or a new photographer came on the scene and tried to snap a picture of Roosevelt in his wheelchair, looking crippled, being carried, the older photographer would knock the camera to the ground or block the shot with his body.
Of the 25,000 pictures in the Roosevelt archives, only 2 show him in a wheelchair. During his 12 years in the White House, not a single news photo was ever published showing him like this.
I've carried Roosevelt.
So obviously the press corps knew that Roosevelt couldn't walk.
Oh, we knew it all the time.
But why wouldn't the press flat out say, President Roosevelt, who has polio, is paralyzed and can't walk?
90-some% of the press was heart and soul with Roosevelt. And they didn't want to say it.
FDR, who could no more walk than fly, conspired with the press to mask his paralysis with a remarkable deception.
he had thick braces on his legs from his ankles really up to above his knees. And the braces kept his legs locked into place. So if he were stood up, if he were helped to a standing position, and then he were leaning on the arms of two strong people, sometimes his son, sometimes a Secret Service man, then with the momentum of them walking along, he could seem to be walking down an aisle, even though he had no power on his own part to walk on his own.
We've moved from averting our eyes from the wheelchair to telling you whether the president has briefs or boxers. Now the media become kind of a national nanny, and we poke our noses into every conceivable corner of private behavior.
Hey, I think it's part of a whole difference in the culture. I mean, there was a deeper sense on the part of everybody in their everyday life back in the 1930s and 40s that there were boundaries around private life. It's inconceivable to imagine people in the 30s and 40s, forget the president, going on the equivalent of Oprah Winfrey or Phil Donahue and talking about their abusive stepfather.
My stepfather, as you know, we had some problems growing up, but he was very good to me.
It's been called the Oprahization of America, and politicians are in on it. Tell the world about your personal life, and maybe they'll like you more.
He got violent with my mother one night, and I just blew through the door and told him he wasn't going to do that anymore. I never stopped loving my stepfather, thinking he was a really good person.
But before you weep for President Clinton or any other politician about some loss of privacy, says Doris Goodwin, remember this lesson. When you publicly discuss your personal life, don't be shocked when others do too.
Once the politicians walk down that path of revealing those parts of their past that they think are going to help them at that moment, make them look positive, make them get accepted by the people, they can't then turn around and say to the press, okay, but you can't see this other part of my life.
These pictures, which we've all seen a million times, may seem harmless, but there's a theory that they chip away at the respect Americans have for the presidency. You know the old saying, familiarity breeds contempt. It just might.
I want to tell you what has been done in the last few days.
The key to a democratic leader in our society is somehow to retain some of the majesty of whatever is part of the presidency still, but to be able to relate to the common man. But you don't do it by giving up that part of yourself that is private. Once you do that, you're lost.
I can't be truthful and say that I'm glad to get back. I'm awfully
So
sorry.
which was better? The old days when the press consciously and willingly kept the president's secrets?
Happy birthday, Mr. President. He started to put his hands
Or today,
inside up my
when
legs.
privacy seems to be a four-letter word.
I think that we will never go back to the days of FDR where reporters knew all the secrets and didn't share them with the public. Now we share them with the public even when we're not quite sure whether they're true or not.
Sister, what's our campaign slogan?
Happy days are here again.
But it was easier back then. All Roosevelt had to contend with was polio and World War II. If he also had to deal with television, with the man who couldn't walk, even run.
In a moment,
Connie Chung, and now she is...
when tough reporters go on Late Show with David Letterman, they ask the tough questions.
State use test, Frank.
That answer and more when we come back.